For the next couple weeks, we're going to fix the Vikings position by position. Today, it's running back. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today on the show, we're going to fix the Vikings running back position. Yesterday, we talked about fixing the run game, but from more of a schematic angle, and there's no research. It doesn't cost you a draft pick to call different plays or to use a different motion or something like that, right? That exists in a different world. It's kind of a different capital, right? But the room the Vikings have had for the last few years has been underwhelming. Aaron Jones has been fine. Pretty happy with him. I think he's been worth the money. Jordan Mason, I think he was worth what they paid to acquire him, both in money and draft picks. You had, Dalvin Cook going off of the deep end into this sort of end of his career, and all these like in between moments with like Alexander Mattison or whatever. But it's been a while since we've had like Adrian Peterson or like prime Dalvin Cook, and we got a running back and we're super excited about him, right? We got guys filling the role. I think that matters for Kevin O'Connell. I think part of that is just where Kevin O'Connell's priorities lie. Never really been the run game, so it's never going to be running back, and that's fine, whatever. But today, I would like to take the other approach. Let's fix that crap out of this position. Let's make it something that we are excited about. And there are 3 different ways we can go at it. And the first one is the most aggressive way. Let's aggressively fix running back. And then there's the half measure. Let's try to improve the position, improve the room a little bit, but let's not break the bank, right? Let's maybe throw a little bone over there, but nothing that's going to, define the offseason because we spent so much on running back. And then there's I'll call it the neglectful one. What if we did just ride this thing out? What if you wanted to argue with me and say the running back room is fine, it doesn't need fixing? We'll address that as well. But first, let's do the fun one. Come on. It's free agency. We get to daydream about everybody being a free agent, or every single free agent being a Viking. And I would say that the first thing we have to do is make a decision about Aaron Jones. So the aggressive thing to do would be to release or trade away Aaron Jones to save some money, let him go do his retirement tour elsewhere, and then go splurge in free agency for a player who we feel will change that room and be part of the team for a longer time than the 2-year deals that the Vikings have signed. Aaron Jones, 2-year deal. Jordan Mason, 2-year deal. Well, let's get a guy who's going to be the guy for a little while. And what's nice is a lot of the free agents are on the younger side, right? They're on the right side of 26. And I would say that there's 4 major free agents that are worth discussing that are kind of the big names that are out there, which is a pretty big number for a single year in free agency in there. Kenneth Walker, reigning Super Bowl MVP, Breece Hall from the Jets, Travis Etienne from the Jaguars, and I'm going to put Rico Dowdle from the Panthers in there. He had a heck of a season, and I think he's in that kind of breakout looking to cash in. Maybe the Vikings want to be that team. So if we're going to do this, firstly, the context. If you just straight cold release Aaron Jones right now, you would save $7.75 million on the cap. You take a $6.8 million dead cap hit. So you're saving about half of his $14.5 million cap hit, a little more than half of it. If you wait, by the way, until March 13th, $2 more million of that will become guaranteed and make him even more difficult to cut. So you're never going to cut Aaron Jones like in camp. If you're going to release him, you're going to do it now. And then if not, he's going to be part of your team no matter what. So let's say that we do that. Let's say we release him, or better yet, that we trade him and we get rid of the $2 million in guaranteed salary he already has on his contract that would then not become dead cap. And we can save $9.75 million if you find a trade partner for Aaron Jones. We don't need a huge draft pick for this, by the way. I mean, 7-7 swap, right? A 7 in 2028 for a 7 in 2027. Doesn't matter, right? It's just somebody willing to take on the money, and you get first right of refusal, and then they probably will, renegotiate that contract, put another year on it or something like that, and that can be their problem. For us, we got rid of it. Let's say we managed to do that. We managed to save $9.7 million. Well, if I'm going to do what I usually do around this time of year and sort of use the PFF free agency contract projections as a rule of thumb for the contract exercises I'm going to do, 3 of the 4 major free agents are projected to get contracts that cost less than what we would save if we find a trade partner for Aaron Jones. So you could save $9.5 million or $9.75 million by trading Aaron Jones. And then, according to this projection, and I should say these projections lowballed quite a bit last year, so take it with a grain of salt. But if these projections are correct, you could sign Kenneth Walker to a 3-year, $27 million deal. That's $9 million a year. And the way that you're structuring that probably has a lower cap hit just because it's Brzezinski, just has a lower cap hit in this year anyways. So you have taken Aaron Jones, swapped him out for Kenneth Walker, and then saved money on top of it. This feels like something I am super interested in doing. I love Aaron Jones. I love him as a guy, maybe more than a player. I think he's perfectly adequate as a player. And if you do want to just hang out with Aaron Jones, I'll talk about it later. I'm not going to be mad about that. But it feels like there's a lot of opportunity to get out of a pretty inflated contract and go take advantage of a market moment in running back where their value is still super depressed from the last 5 years of just the league starting to devalue running backs a little more every single year. And the cap going up so much while running back contracts haven't kept up with it. So running backs are cheap. And there's, if you want to go with my numbers and say, yeah, I don't think Javonte Williams counts in this or whatever, there's 4 good running backs on the market that all are going to sort of siphon away from each other. And that's just supply and demand, basic economics. There is a big supply, which means that these bidding wars don't go the player's way as much. Breece Hall can't demand $700 bajillion because everybody will be like, whatever, I'll just go sign Travis Etienne then. And they all kind of normalize and regulate each other. And don't get attached to Kenneth Walker if you don't want to. Breece Hall is a very good running back. He has that explosive ability that I've been working for. I actually did a whole show about bringing in Breece Hall and some of the other fun free agents that the Vikings could get. Travis Etienne had a much more consistent season that in a Jaguars season that sort of served as a breakout for the Liam Cohen version of the Jaguars and the new Trevor Lawrence. Etienne had a big part in that and sort of shed some of the stink that he had from earlier in his career when he struggled a little bit more in Jacksonville. And there was a lot of stuff going wrong in Jacksonville. And part of it was, why isn't this draft pick working out? And then, like I said, Rico Dowdle, who I think just bang for your buck is my favorite here. He's also the oldest of these prospects at 27 years old. But a 3-year deal for Rico Dowdle at $8.5 million a year. That's the amount that PFF projected for him. They project a 2-year deal for 17. I'm going to add another year onto that. So 3 years, $25.5 million. Again, we are saving money, assuming we find a trade partner for Aaron Jones. But even if we don't, we're losing $1 million a year. We're basically lateral moving this to a younger version of, I would say, a similar one cut and go kind of running back, but with that sort of bowling ball physicality that I would be really, really excited about. But there's another option here. What if the Vikings wanted to, get rid of Aaron Jones? And Jordan Mason is also another one that, it's kind of small potatoes when it comes to the cap, which makes it feel to me like it's not the most helpful thing. Plus, he has a couple of void years. It doesn't save a lot. It would save $590,000. You take a $5.2 million dead cap hit. So of the 5.8 that he costs right now, you would be saving a tenth of that. Barely a tenth of that. So there's not a lot of meat on the bone for getting rid of Jordan Mason right now. He should be a Viking next year. But if you did get rid of Aaron Jones and you decided Jordan Mason was going to be your guy, you could turn to the draft. And there's really only, I think, one really big swingy running back in the draft right now. One that feels like he's going to be a first rounder. With running backs, sometimes those guys can leak into the top of the second, like Jordan Taylor or Jonathan Taylor did. You can have that kind of dynamic, but he's going to be somewhere, and he's going to be a high pick. He's going to be somebody's going to bring him in to be, your 1-1 in your dynasty draft. And that is Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. I actually did a live stream on Patreon evaluating Jeremiah Love. And what I found was, you had this really bursty acceleration And he kind of runs, he wants to run with that bowling ball style, but he doesn't really have the size. He runs like he's a skinny guy. I don't actually know what his weight is at right now, and these things fluctuate a lot anyways, like what the measurables are, but he runs like a guy that doesn't have that low center of gravity that you would hope for a bowling ball type guy. And so he can kind of take contact on the hip, lose his balance, and then either get slowed down a lot or maybe even lose his footing entirely and go to the ground, which of course in college, you don't need to be touched. So that was the end of the play. He was really helpful in the pass game. There was a lot of, get a swing pass out to him in the flat and then just like watch him eat up space really, really, really quickly. And boy, if you can make a guy miss too, watch out. Like there was a lot of really explosive potential. So if you want that explosive, it reminded me of like kind of stylistically, like the way the Vikings would have used Jerick McKinnon back in the day, but like supercharge it, like on nitrous, and that's the kind of, receiving back, get him in space, out to the edge kind of guy. Eyes are good. Everything else should be a starter in the league. And I don't know where that guy goes because I don't know if you're so satisfied with him that he's like a top 7 pick like Bijan or Ashton Genty or any of that. I don't think he's getting that kind of hype, but he is an option if you want to go for the big swing. So I think the Vikings can upgrade. It's not that I'm dissatisfied with Aaron Jones. I just want to be opportunistic. I think there's an opportunity to upgrade this position in a scheme agnostic way, in a way that, any incoming GM is not going to argue with. And maybe even save money in the process if those projections are correct. But even if they aren't, whatever extra you're spending, it's not going to be that much. And I think you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. But we don't have to do that. We can do something maybe a little more conservative as well. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Indeed. If you have ever hired somebody who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important it is to get things right, especially in the world of hiring. If you have a small business, that is an expensive thing to do. It is expensive to spend somebody's time on working through all these candidates. It's expensive to train that person, and you have to get it right the first time. But if you're dealing with this tiny little limited pool because you can't get your job posting out there to enough people, you might not even be looking at the person who's going to be perfect for your job. That is where Indeed comes out. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen. Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you're an everydayer and you want to go ad-free, now you can with the Locked On Everydayer Club. Just go to LockedOnVikings.supercast.com to sign up. It's $5 a month or $50 a year if you rather, and you can get ad-free episodes of Locked On Vikings, access to a special Discord server where all the Locked On hosts are cutting it up, and much more. Let's move on to, I'll call it the more conservative, the half measure idea. This would have been the one that I would expect from Kwesi if he still worked here, because he loved to find that guy on the periphery that wasn't so expensive, but maybe that had a chance to give you a lot more value and was cheap for like a reason. So you had to just kind of like take a risk. It was a very stock trader way to go about it, right? Where, all right, I'm going to take this risk and I'm going to try to build a portfolio. He would call it a portfolio of all of these risks. Well, Kwesi just got fired. So I don't know if this is the mentality anymore, but it's worth going over what that mentality would represent. So whatever does happen at the running back position, we can put it into the right context. There's a ton of free agent running backs that I think comprise this category. I would put Tyler Algier in this. He's been a good running back, but he's always been part of a greater whole, right? Whether it was Bijan or before him, it was never just the Tyler Algier show in the way that it would have been the Breece Hall show. So I put him in this category, even though PFF has him making about the same amount. He's also, under 26 right now. So he's young, and maybe there's a little more excitement about him than I'm just like sensing. Maybe people are more excited about him, but I put him in that. I would say like Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, these guys that have had their heyday, but are kind of past it now and are going to be on their third team, like those are the kinds of running backs that it reminds me of like when the Vikings signed Latavius Murray, where, okay, that guy can do the job. He's done the job in the past. He's been exciting, and you don't expect him to be the same guy he was, at the third year of his career, because it's just not how running back works, right? Like Najee Harris is 28. 28 for a running back is starting to get long in the tooth. It's just the way that running backs' bodies, the wear and tear that they take. It's just when that age cliff tends to hit, it just tends to hit a little bit earlier. It's not that nice even 30 number that we kind of take for granted at so many other positions. J.K. Dobbins is a really interesting one. He'd be another guy on his third team. And he's 27, but I feel like at a 1 year, $5.5 million deal, which is the PFF projection there, I feel like that would be a coup. I feel like that would be an insane deal. J.K. Dobbins plus Jordan Mason would be a pretty fun running back room to me, but it wouldn't have the star power, right? It would still feel like a half measure, but boy, you'd be saving a bunch of resources that then you could probably apply elsewhere if you want to spend a bunch of resources on corner. Well, this is one of the ways to make that money happen, is to go to a younger, cheaper option. But the thing about where Aaron Jones is at is who knows what you're going to get from him next year, right? He's sustained a lot of injuries, and eventually, that cliff comes, and it does not come gradually. It hits you like a truck. So it's one of those things where if you're a year early on stepping away from Aaron Jones, okay. And if you get a little younger and cheaper, and even if you get a little worse, maybe you make that up elsewhere by using those resources. That's not my favorite way to go about things, right? I think you always want to try to get better players on the field, right? Like to me, downgrading on purpose is a really, really, really risky thing to do, because now those new resources have to represent an improvement somewhere else. And if you go make a free agent signing and that free agent signing busts, you just got worse at two positions. It feels like that's a really big risk that goes a little bit underappreciated. But I am looking at the J.K. Dobbins possibility. If that's truly what he's going to make, that's really awesome. His agent, by the way, is Zach Hiller, who has, I'll call it, a complicated relationship with the Vikings. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Rachaad White would be another one that he just feels like he's been this crazy underrated player for a really, really long time. But like last year, around this time, we were daydreaming about like Saquon Barkley. This isn't that. It's a guy that would pair with Jordan Mason, and you would figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are and how they complement each other and how to construct a rotation around it. You can also go with somebody who's been around the block a little bit more, like Jeremy McNichols. He's 30. Kareem Hunt is around. He's Raheem Mostert, who's been in these kinds of Shanahan-McVay offenses forever. Nick Chubb. Those older players, I think of Kenneth Gainwell that way, even though he's going to be about 27. I still think of Kenneth Gainwell that way just because he's been around so much. But he's a guy that just hasn't been the top dude. And then the other name that at least makes the PFF top 200 guys that's on this list, so his name's in front of me here, is Isaiah Pacheco and Brian Robinson, who are two guys who I would say haven't always been able to, lock down starting roles. And I think we can probably afford to aim a little higher than that. But if you want to strike that balance between saving on resources, getting money out of the running back position, where the Vikings are spending quite a bit, they're spending $24 million on their running backs. And for the 2026 season, that ranks 20 million in terms of just cap hit. I was looking at average annual value. Right now they're spending 20 million on their running backs, and that ranks only second to the Saints, which is a very funny team to see at the top of any spending numbers right now, because the whole narrative is that they have so much dead cap that they can't pay anybody. But I guess they can pay their running backs. But the Vikings maybe want to take some off the top of that. So if you want to strike a balance between that priority, but also not just have a whole bunch of who's its and nobodies on the position, this could be the world you could go with. And the other thing you could do is the draft. Another Patreon live stream that I just did was Jonah Coleman. Just because I cover the Vikings and it's the most familiar thing, I promise I'm trying not to do the boss baby joke with everybody, but it reminded me a lot of how I watched Alexander Mattison play in Minnesota, where there was quite a ceiling to it. It was very, very, very conservative. And when I cover running backs, greed is a spectrum that I'm always thinking about. I call it greed, but you could call it risk taking or whatever, or going for the explosives. And a couple years ago, when it was Alexander Mattison and Cam Akers for that couple weeks before Akers got hurt in that Atlanta game, those two guys represented so perfectly the balance between that spectrum. And I think Aaron Jones replacing those two guys represents a sort of perfect have your cake and eat it too between both, where Aaron Jones does go for the explosive and finds it, but he's judicious enough not to go for it every time, and he makes the right decision a lot. And that's why he's a more accomplished running back than Cam Akers or Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison, not a greedy player at all. And Jonah Coleman out of Washington is somebody that he's projected to be like a third rounder, right? So this would be very much like taking your late round, kind of ho-hum running back that's going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust a lot. He's not going to fumble. He's going to be very conservative and it's going to be very safe, but he's never going to run away with one. You get him the ball out in space, he's not making that guy miss reliably at all. This is the most unexciting way to do the running back, but unexciting can very much be okay because it would be consistent. And I think that's the future that Jonah Coleman has in this league. I think putting him on a late day 2, early day 3 part of the draft is probably appropriate for that. Somebody who will play for you, but is never going to be the guy that takes over a game or anything, but he'll be on your roster. He'll play out his rookie year. He's not it's not is he going to make the team thing? At least not to me. And that would be what that kind of thing represents. There's a lot of day 2 running backs. I won't talk about them all today, but that's one guy that represents that same kind of half measure. We're going to save a bunch of money. We'll throw a mid-round pick at it, maybe the compensatory third, and move on from there. And hopefully we saved a bunch of money we can spend elsewhere, get under the cap and all of that good stuff. But why do any of this? Isn't the running back room fine? Let's talk about that scenario next on Locked On Vikings. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. Whether it's speed skating races that come down to the wire, curling that comes down to the last throw, what's it going to bump around, even niche events become totally must-watch when you've got to bet on things and you're fully locked into the whole competition because you're waiting for either how that individual event's going to go or maybe total medal counts. So you're locked into everything and watching the counts as US and China and Russia and Italy and all of these countries jockey for position. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. A very rudimentary way to evaluate how a team is spending its resources is to look at how they rank in spending of those resources and then what kind of production they're getting. The easy way to do this, go to the Over the Cap website, go to the positional spending page and say, hey, look, the Vikings are second in running back spending, but they don't have the second best running back room. Let's fix that. There are a few things that misses out on, though. For one, the Vikings haven't spent a significant draft pick on a running back in a long time. Since Alexander Mattison, since 2019. So none of their draft capital has gone to this. In the entire Kwesi era, they only drafted 2 running backs. And it was Ty Chandler in the 5th and Dwayne McBride in the 7th, who didn't even make the team. And I guess you could throw in Kenny Nwangwu in there in 2021, who was a 4th round pick, but they haven't spent a day 2 pick on a running back since Alexander Mattison. So while they're not spending that much money, you look at a team like the Raiders or the Falcons who spent, top 10 picks on their running backs, and it doesn't really feel like the Vikings were the ones that went out and splurged, right? So if you want to compile all the draft capital spent on running back over the last 3 or 4 years, the Vikings probably wouldn't rank as highly. They would probably be a team that has spent about a middling amount. They've chosen to spend money instead of draft picks, and they're spending a lot of that. But that means their draft picks can go to other things like quarterback, like Jordan Addison's and Dallas Turner's, or guys that didn't work out as well. If you accept the premise that the Vikings are spending a middle amount on running back and they have a middle running back room, doesn't that seem like a totally fine thing? As it is, these contracts will expire as they were designed to expire naturally, right? In the 2027 offseason, Aaron Jones will simply become a free agent. And there are no void years on his contract, so he'll just go and walk. And if he signs a big enough deal at the age of 33 in 2027, the Vikings might even get a comp pick out of it. As for Jordan Mason, it's the same thing. There are void years, but he would still be comp pick eligible, and he would carry a $2.4 million dead cap hit, which by 2027 will be pennies. It'll barely be, that's like rookie contract numbers. It's nothing. Why not just let that happen? Both these guys are on the last years of their deals. Let them play, and then we'll just reconstruct the room from scratch the next year. It's not like reconstructing an O-line or a cornerback room from scratch where you need 12 guys in the room. You need 4. Draft a guy, sign a guy, bring in an undrafted rookie or somebody from the XFL that's hot, and call it a day, right? And of course, running back doesn't matter, right? That's the other argument. The other part of this is why spend anything on this position after so much time. I spent a lot of time on this podcast in a different era of my analysis journey, arguing that same thing, that, hey, the run game doesn't have that much impact on winning, not nearly as much as the pass game. And the running back himself doesn't have that much impact on the success of the run game anyways, right? The difference between a good running back and a bad running back is, 4 yards a carry or 3 yards a carry, versus a quarterback goes from 8 yards per attempt to 6 yards per attempt. It's twice as impactful to have a good passing game than a running game. That's a really rudimentary way to put it. But I think the market has adjusted properly for that, maybe even overcorrected to the point where now you can get the premier bell of the ball running back for the same price as people are paying for guys who are going to be wide receiver 4 or tight end 2. I mean, you're paying Josh Oliver money for guys that are going to touch the ball several times. And just you're going to carry the ball, and if we trust you not to fumble it, of that could be worth that much money, right? Just the ball security part of it, let alone any explosiveness that they bring once they do get into the second level. But the argument just goes that the blocking is more important than the guy carrying it, right? What hole there is, most running backs can run through it. And the analytical impact of the last 10 yards of a 20-yard run is way, way, way less significant than the first 10 yards. The first 10 yards are decided more by blocking, and ipso facto, running backs don't matter. My opinion on this has gotten, I think, a little more nuanced. Again, part of it is because these guys aren't making superstar contracts anymore. They're not making, they're no longer Adrian Peterson, who was the highest paid player on the Vikings for some years. That never happens again, even with the best players on certain teams, right? That's just not the way the market is. So now it maybe represents an opportunity to pour a million more in it and get way more than $1 million worth of difference between one guy and the next guy, because $1 million is nothing. And so any difference is helpful. And maybe there's a market inefficiency there. But I've also just kind of evolved to understand how a running back matters to the success of a run play anyways. Like that Greed thing. If Cam Akers goes for the explosive all the time and ends up taking more negative runs, a negative run is a much more impactful thing, and it's worth paying to avoid that versus somebody who doesn't get that explosiveness, which is why I've sort of gravitated toward the Jonah Colemans of the world. It was how I kind of learned to love Alexander Mattison in his time, even when people were really frustrated with the Vikings having a poor running game and blaming Mattison a lot for that. I went, okay, but he mostly picks the right gap. He gets his cloud of dust and he doesn't fumble. We were pretty happy with that. I don't know. I think that there's an argument to be made there. I still kind of shudder a little bit at the idea of, you've got a top 10 pick, and like how often people will pine, I will say, either in my comments or elsewhere on social media, for the idea of a top 10 pick in the middle of a season. Like in December last year, the Vikings are eliminated and everyone's going, oh my God, if they lost those 5 games instead of winning 5 at the end, God, they would have picked 6th. And then what if they picked Jeremiah Love at pick 6 and their team doesn't change all that much? They get an infusion of talent at running back that's going to like split reps with Jordan Mason, and then they save $10 million. Like, really? You got all excited about the franchise altering? That's not franchise altering. He's a good player, maybe. It seems like he's going to be a good prospect. He'll contribute, but franchise altering? But at the same time, somebody like Jonathan Taylor kind of has been, or Bijan Robinson now defines that offense. Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. Finding that superstar, finding that guy. I think there's a lot of ways there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's, teams that go by committee and moneyball it have had success. The Eagles have did that for a long time before Saquon Barkley was there. And teams that pour a lot into that position have had fearsome running games like the Lions or the Falcons. So I find myself open to a lot of ideas here, a lot of really exciting. I think I get the most excited with the first one, the aggressive one, just because being aggressive at running back isn't that expensive of a thing to do. So go do it. It's fine. You can kind of act like you're splurging a little bit, but you're not actually splurging. You get the bill and you go, oh, that actually isn't that bad for this really nice dinner we all just had, right? So that one kind of excites me a lot. But honestly, if they do stick with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason and say, hey, I'm not spending that much and we're just going to run this back with guys that we know, I still think Aaron Jones has plenty of speed in the tank. He didn't show any signs of slowing down last year, even though he's at an age where you would expect that. Not everybody's the same. And I like Jordan Mason a lot, especially when Aaron Jones was hurt and Jordan Mason had to be running back 1. He did well enough to actually have people asking, should he be the starter? So, hey, sure, run it back or don't. Do anything. Eat Arby's. Talk to y'all next week. And as always, Skull.